Hey guys, today we're going to be making a Fortnite riff tutorial in Blender. It's going to be the one that from the Ariana Grande live event. You can see it on screen right now. We're going to start off by making the portal base. We're going to keep the default cube and we're just going to go to edit mode, and then we're going to change into Y or X view. We're going to scale it down on the X axis right now to make it really thin. Now we're just going to scale it up on the Z-axis to make it a little taller, so it's a rectangle instead of just like a square. This is the shape that I'm going with, but you can just make any shape you'd like. This is just one I prefer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change to face selection mode. I'm going to select the front face and nothing else. I'm just going to delete this face, so we get like a hollowed out shell right now. And like this is the border of the portal, and that's kind of like what's going to be the glowing part, and then this is the back of it. We're going to be making the rift cracks right now, so I just imported a plane. We go back into edit mode, and we're going to be scaling it down on the Z-axis. You really want this to be also super thin because, as I said, it's the rift cracks, which if you remember from the live event, they were pretty thin and they almost look like they were lightning. So we're just going to be doing the same here. I'm going to once that's done, I'm gonna go into loop cut. I'm gonna add just a few loop cuts. I'm adding right now about 7. You could add more or less. It's just your preference. So now I'm gonna go to the move selector, and I'm gonna go to the vector selection tool also. And then I'm gonna click proportional editing here, and then next to it in the drop down menu, I'm gonna select that. And then I'm going to choose connected only. And now what this will do is it will move any vectors near the vectors I select. And so here I'm just scaling down the proportional editing selector. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move around the vectors I selected, and this will kind of give me a smooth out movement to the shape instead of it just being like very stiff. And I'm just going to do that for all the vectors. I'm just going to make some like lightning look to it. So this is kind of the shape that I'm making right now. You can make something similar or vastly different. It's just up to you. I'm going to turn off proportional editing right now, and I'm just going to fix these vectors so it doesn't have like this weird angle. I'm just going to make it perpendicular to the other vector next to it. I'm just going to do that for the est. Now I'm going to just select the endpoints, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on proportional editing again. I'm just going to scale up the selection a bit, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it down on the Z-axis so I can make it a little thinner. And then on the starting points, I'm going to do the same, but I'm going to scale it up a little. So, because it's like where it's connecting to the portal. Go into object mode, and I'm just going to make a few more. Okay, so I'm back. I made a lot of them. I just added some modifiers. Here's the ones for the rift crack. Please free to stop the video. And here is the one for the portal borders. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just going around and placing the rift cracks around the portal so we can get that like tear in like space and time kind of look to it. I'm just going to be placing some smaller ones also attaching to the larger ones to give it a more lightning look. And here's how it looks when it's done. So now is the shaders. We're going to start off by adding a noise texture, and this is for the crack, like the rift cracks. And I just put, I'm just going to put a color ramp right now, and then I'm just going to connect the factor from the noise texture to the factor of the color ramp, or you could do the color instead. Blend mode, I do the alpha blend. Shadow mode is set to none. And then I'm just gonna move this down here, and I'm gonna connect the color from the color ramp to the alpha. And then I'm just gonna crank up the blacks and the whites in the color ramp to get it more contrasted. And I'm just gonna play around with some of these settings here just to get the mapping on the cracks a little better. So I'm setting the roughness to 0.25, the scale to -0.2 on the X, and I'm just putting 1.62 for the Y. And then I'm just going to change it to UV for the vector from the texture coordinates to the mapping node. And then I have set the emission color to blue, and I'm just going to turn up the emission strength to 50. This should give you that color. So now what we're going to start working on is we're going to copy these settings, and we're going to carry them over to the border. And so this now gives you the border, but I don't like how it's super bright and even looking. So what I'm going to do is add a layer weight node, and then I'm going to duplicate the color ramp, and I'm going to input the Fresnel, and I'm going to just crank up the whites on it a little bit more, and then I'm going to change the color to the same as the emission, and this should hide out some of the brightness in it. Now what we're doing is we're going to be adding the magic effects, which this is kind of like I don't know how to explain it, but in the game it kind of had like this mist or fog kind of glow to it. And so I'm just adding a transparent and emission node right now. These will kind of be like what we're mainly using. I'm just going to give it a slightly bluish pink color. Then I'm going to put a mix shader node. I'm going to put the transparent on top and the emission on bottom. Now nothing will really happen, so we're going to have to make a mapping node, or a mask using nodes right now. And so I just put a noise texture. I'm going to be putting a gradient texture right now, and I'm going to be putting a math node, or mixed node, sorry. For the colors, I'm going to be putting the gradient on top and the noise texture on bottom. I'm going to increase the factor to 1 and set the blend mode to multiply. And then I'm just going to connect that and show you how it looks. You want to connect the factor from the noise texture to the mixed color node, and then what I'm going to do is just put a color ramp in here and then just crank up the values so we get more contrasted look. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to move over the gradient texture and then put the texture coordinate and mapping nodes, and then I'm just going to mess around with the mapping so the gradient texture has like a circle mask or inside the squares, because you don't really want it to have like a square texture to the magic effects. It's better just to have a more circular effect. And I'm just going to connect the object to vector from the texture coordinate to the mapping node. I'm going to change it from linear to spherical in the gradient texture, and so you should get this kind of look for your mask. And then you want the blend mode to be alpha blend and shadow mode to none. And then just connect the mask you just created to the factor and the mix shader, and this should give you this color. I'm going to just darken up the white value here to make it a little bit more transparent and not that prominent. And so this is what you should have right now. So I copied most of the nodes over to the particle effects that we're going to be making, and I'm just using the same plane like mixture that I did for the magic effects. And all I'm doing right now is I'm just clamping the color ramp a bit more to get more contrast. I'm going to be changing the noise texture a little bit. I'm setting the scale to 1, details to 0. I'm just going to put the distortion to like 8.5 to get more squiggly effect to the noise. I'm going to add a Voronoi texture right now, and then I'm going to add a gamma texture to crank up the contrast. And then I'm going to input the color to the color, and then I'm going to set the gamma to 2.5, and then I'm going to put a color ramp, then connect the color from the gamma to the factor in the color ramp. I'm going to crank up the white on it, and then I'm going to change it to constant, and then I'm just going to crank it up even more. And then this is what it looks like right now. I'm going to change the scale to 45, and then I'm going to have to put an invert mode right now. So the dots are white for the mask, and then I'm going to plug that in into the top value in the mix color node, and then this is what you should have for the particle effects. So the alpha blend is the same and shadow mode is the same as the previous ones. So now we're making the portal itself, and so here I just have an image texture. What we're going to do is try to make like a parallax effect to it. So I'm going to put a mapping node, and then I'm going to put a geometry node, and then a vector math node. And so I'm going to set this one to subtract, and then I'm going to set another one at scale. And so I'm going to take the incoming value from the geometry and put it in the vector for the scale, and then position on the top for the subtract node, and then the scale into the bottom of the subtract node. And I'm going to connect that to the vector in the mapping. And then what I'm doing here is I'm just going to be changing the values so the image texture doesn't look stretched or awkward. And so these values might be a little different depending on the size of your portal and what image scale or resolution you're using. So you're just gonna have to mess around with it. This is kind of like what I'm doing right now. And so this is what I got for it. And so what you can do is, as you can see, there's a parallax effect, but if you change the scale size, you can actually make it move farther back and have like more depth to the portal. So what we're going to do now is the glare effects. And so in 3.5, you can actually do live composition real time in EV and cycles. So I just enabled it to be always, not just during a render. And so I turned on to use the nodes. I'm putting a glare node in there. And I'm just going to change the streaks to 1. And then you can have it set to 2, but I just prefer at 1. I'm going to change the angle offset to 180. And the only issue with this is, depending on the way you view it, the glare might be facing outwards from the portal or behind the portal. And so depending on which angle you want to view it at, you might want to set the angle offset to a negative value or a positive value. And so that's it.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and dropping a like.